So good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this amazing right morning, and also welcome to one of the first lectures of this 3-month executive development program and certificate course on the UGC sponsored course on human rights. Today we have for the very first lecture Professor Papia Singh Gupta. She is associated with Center for Political Studies, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Most of us know her as one of the persons contributors who has written the chapter rights in the book Political Theory and Introduction, edited by Ashok Acharya and Rajiv Bhargav. We also know her as a phenomenal teacher. Dr. Sen Gupta has her doctorate in political theory and Indian politics from the Center for Political Studies, JNU, where she now teaches. And she has a long experience in teaching and mentorship. Now, as we were, having a conversation before we went live, it will be around 20 years of, Dr. Sen Gupta being teaching. And she was also awarded the Distinguished Teacher of Delhi University Award. Her research interests are in decolonization, institutional mechanisms for minority accommodation, democratic and human rights, language education, and policies of multiculturalism and gender issues. She is also the author of Language's Identity in Colonial India, Policies and Politics, and Critical Sites of Inclusion in Higher Education in India. Dr. Sen Gupta has published in reputed national and international journals, including Economic and Political Weekly, Geoforum, International Journal on Diversity, Social Action, and Droited Cultures. She has been a fellow at Institute for Advanced Studies in Humanities, University of Edinburgh, Brown University, Institute of Federalism, University of Freiburg. Dr. Sen Gupta has held visiting professor positions at Rhodes University in South Africa and at University of Edinburgh in 2016. She also won the Global South Solidarity Award for her work on language in 2021 by International Association for Applied Linguistics, Netherlands. So it is, we are very glad, ma'am, that you are here with us, and thank you, and we welcome you once again. I request the participants before, inviting Dr. Sen Gupta to take over the session. I again request the participants to have queries and questions, which we'll take up at the end of the session. So Dr. Sen Gupta.
Thank you so much, Shipra, for that introduction. And a very, very good morning to all the participants. And I'm really glad, because, after a very long time, I'm speaking on what are rights, which has been the very, very, the very initial, part of my research. And I have really, the rights is a concept of political theory, which has been very close to my heart. Because I've always thought that when we talk about liberty, when we talk about justice and laws, when we talk of equality and fraternity and unity, solidarity among humans, one thing that ties all of us together is being human. And the second thing, to achieve all these kind of things, liberty, equality, solidarity, I think the very fundamental core is rights, because those are the claims, the entitlements of simply being human. And among, all different varieties and, kinds of rights, the most important, I would say, are human rights. But having said that, it is also true that, there is a lot of, ambiguity around human rights. Means we do understand, when we in normal conversation, when we talk, that we use the term human rights pretty often, and somehow we do make sense of it. But there are a varied and diverse understandings of human rights, and I think that is something that one has to take into consideration one's cultural community, one's gender aspect, where you stay, or whether you are from a very developed nation, what are your socioeconomic, political conditions. And I think that is why when we talk of rights, and it's very close to my heart, because it actually ties a lot of the fundamental concepts of political theory all together, because it all culminates into having rights. So having said that, a warm welcome to all the participants. I hope I'll make it fruitful and you'll enjoy it. I am going to speak roughly for an hour. And I would be delighted, for about your questions. There is a part where I am going to talk about the controversy. So, you can, anything, about the contemporary controversies or, the frictions between, legal rights, human rights. So it is not just going to be a kind of a theoretical understanding of rights, which anyway I'm going to give, because, I think that's very primary as well as fundamental, because a lot of times we think that we understand what rights are without actually understanding what they are. So, in general, when we are talking to each other, we do think that you understand me when I say I have this right. But then it might be a very narrow understanding. So it leads to different kinds of debates, different kinds of perspectives in political theory, as well as, let me just, make a statement here. Whenever I have, whenever I've entered class specifically for political theory, I have realized that, students as well as a lot of participants feel that, theory is very abstract. It's something that, you just mug it up and go and give an exam, and it does not actually affect our life so much. Very contradictory to this kind of an understanding. It is actually, theory and, these theoretical concepts. One has to understand the practical applicability, because that is what makes a society, a civil society, civil. And I think, that also depends, how one has been taught political theory, whether you were just people came and talked about philosophers and gave you theories without actually bringing down and thrashing it out to everyday living. And that, I think, is the perspective I'm going to take today. So thanks for inviting, and let's start. Now, this is, of course, a picture of struggles, right? Protests, demonstrations, which are so new as well as very old. The pictures might be new, but, the contents are old. The people have been struggling since ancient times. We have had this kind of, the society is very stratified. There are people who are rich, who are powerful, and because they are rich and powerful, they have privileges. And everybody else, that is the majority of the society, it then becomes slaves or traders or merchants, and they do not have those privileges by birth. So in that sense, we have actually come a long way from, let's say, the ancient Indian tradition or the ancient civilizations, be it the Chinese civilization, the Mesopotamian, civilization, the Indus Valley civilization. And even after that, when we talk about political theory, we normally tend to go back to Greek political philosophy, and where we talk about, how the society was divided on the basis of birth. And birth becomes a very central principle of attainment of what you want. Because, if by birth, which is essentially an accident, because you do not decide where you are going to be born into. And still, when, it is that birth which actually, the family you are born into, the country you are born into, the territory you are born into, the state you are born into, the religion, the language, the economic status of the family you are born into, everything has a huge ramification throughout an individual's life. And it is on that accidental birth, all the privileges were actually ended up. And that is how, I think, when we talk about rights, it is not a privilege. It is it is not by virtue of being born into a particular country, into a particular society or family, or, a very rich family or whatever. It is more fundamental of being born as human. And that is the core, when you understand human rights. At the same time, because it is, it is also a kind of a concept which is very evolutionary. So you cannot just go back to just the UN, the United Nations Human Rights Declaration of 1948. That's a primary document, a written documentation. But if you will see that, every few years, you have an addition to that particular document. Because as the society is growing, as we are evolving, there are many different, kinds of rights which have been added to this particular Human Rights Declaration by virtue of sanctions, by virtue of the other conventions and declarations. So in that sense, it is not something fixated. It is, it is quite, accommodative, and it has, with the changing, the change in cultural, societal aspect, environmental aspect, economic, gender aspects of, evolution of human beings, human rights have also gone up. Okay, so, or they have grown, and, the paradigm of human rights have enlarged. Now, a familiar understanding of rights is that, individuals have rights, and the fact that they have rights, it is a limitation on the state as what may be done to them. Now, although this is something, specifically, students of political science are familiar with it. But most of the time when you use in your colloquial language that I have a right, as a kid, you might have told your parents that I have a right to decide whether I want to go to a farewell party or not, or I have a right to decide what I want to wear. And, why are you always putting, so many hurdles that don't wear this, don't wear that? Means, why are you doing this? Please let me do what I want to do. And then, normally you hear your parents coming up and saying that, look, it is because, so, they give a justification as to why, they are having, or, why you are being stopped to wear a particular kind of an attire or to eat a particular kind of a food, maybe because it's unhealthy. Now we simply, when we talk of it, we use the term rights, but otherwise, and it's not as if we are, it's a wrong usage. It is not a wrong usage, but specifically within the paradigm of the political, within the paradigm of state legislation, international legislation, whenever we use the term rights, rights are essentially claims and entitlements which humans have. And the state, by virtue of its political power, by virtue of its coercive power, because the state controls coercive power of police, military, army. So, these rights are actually restrictions which are imposed on the state, that the state is not supposed to do these things on the human beings. Now that might change. And when I'm talking from human rights perspective, yes, human is the category. When we talk about citizenship rights, or we talk about socio-political rights or refugee rights, then it might change vis-a-vis the state, because different states have different forms of government, different kinds of government. Some states might be democratic, socialist, some might be welfareist, some might be liberal individualist democracies, some might be Marxist or communist, in their nature. So in that sense, right package, or the package of rights varies from different states, but human rights as such remains, a kind of a paradigm or a huge umbrella, because all these rights can be subsumed under human rights. In modern times, because human rights is, and rights per se, when you do rights, you say that it's a modern political concept. Now, why is it a modern political concept? Because first and foremost, it comes during the time of post-enlightenment in Western countries, or the Western paradigm, the Western discourse. And here, Western is essentially the West European discourse and the American discourse. In fact, American discourse comes in much later. When we, in political theory, when we talk about Western discourse, it's mainly, the Western European discourse. And the two most important modern documents which were pioneered, and which essentially, put rights on paper. Of course, we have the Magna Carta of 1215, but again, Magna Carta does not talk about human rights and rights for all. Why human rights and rights for all? I'm using it synonymously because Magna Carta talks of rights of the citizen. Plato talks of the rights of the citizens, right? Or Aristotle takes up citizenship. And here, then it is because of a particular category of individuals who are entitled to rights. Not everybody is entitled to rights. But when you talk of human rights, these two are the most important declarations. One is the American Declaration of Independence, 1776, and the second one is the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, 1779. Now, these are the most important modern, constitutional documents which actually talk, and the centrality given to rights. Now, we can debate that, why it is rights of man and not rights of humans, or, rights for everybody. It is essentially because, I'll give a little bit of a benefit of doubt, because, we know that the society is very patriarchal. And this is also a time, remember, this is like, the time of the 16th century in political science and political theory is also a time of a shift from the rights of, the divine rights of the king, when people were writing, and we always say that Machiavelli is actually, in between, because Machiavelli is the first modern political thinker. And why? Because, he's now, shifting from the prince, and he gives his talk on the prince, but, and we always study prince and not the discourses, where he actually goes on to talk not only about, giving advices of statecraft to the prince, but a discourse on statecraft from the perspective of the people at large, the population at large. And then Thomas Hobbes, the very famous English political philosopher, comes up, and he is the first one, to write about man, or, on human nature and on human rights, on man, on the rights of man. Although, again, very narrowly, when we study political theory, we just take, like theories of, sovereignty and legal sovereignty and obligation and the Leviathan, and, relate that to Hobbes. But if you read the social contract, the original text of social contract, you will find that, Thomas Hobbes is actually one of the very primary figure, who comes up. In fact, he's the first figure in the entire Western discourse to give, to open his entire book, the Leviathan, which, also establishes the social contract theory of state as, a chapter on man. And here, I think, then man subsumes, being, everybody belonging to the human race, and not only the rulers and the powerful. So these two are very, very important declarations, which, we, whenever we talk about rights, even human rights declaration, when human rights declaration was drafted, these two became the very fundamental source of, the drafting committee of the UN, UN DR, that where they got, and of course they elaborated and they expanded this paradigm of rights on, to include most of the people, to include all humans. What are rights? Now, rights, when we talk about rights, if I can just use one sentence, and I would say to get one's due. Now, to get one due can be as a human being, as a citizen, as an individual, and as a member of a group. And here, group, means it can actually have different connotations. Group can mean a profession, that you are a doctor, so you belong to the group of medical personnel, so you are a group of doctors. A group can mean a cultural group, that you are born into a cultural, religious group or a community, and so you are a member of that group. And one individual can be a member of variety of groups. So essentially, when anybody talks about what is a right, it is to get one's due. Because I think it's like, qua human, because you are human, you have rights. And that is a very, very fundamental to understand. And then, they call it that it is an entitlement, although I'm not very happy to use the word entitlement, because it seems as if it's a property. Because when we use the term entitlement, we are entitled to something. But I would say that, human rights, or rights in general, are claims, because we are humans. To live a full life of a human, and here full life means a life of dignity, a life of respect, a life where you have the basic needs fulfilled, that is food, fresh air, water, housing, medical facilities. Then comes education, livelihood, employment, and all these, then, it's a huge package. So although we use, right in singular, but it is always a package that, all of these rights are interconnected. So you cannot have a good human life if you might be, if you are devoid of food, or you are devoid even of education. But then, there are these, these rights came up not all together. And as I said, in the beginning, that, there was a kind of an evolution, that, how rights evolved, and even human rights evolved. So, coming to the next slide, that is the 3 generations of rights. When I said about the evolution of rights, this term generation, was used much later. In fact, if you go by, T.H. Marshall's theory of rights, which was written in the 1950s, which was published, I think, in 1952, but it was very publicly publicized outside United Kingdom by the 60s. We talk about civil political rights, socio-economic rights, and group rights. Now, while T.H. Marshall talked of, civil rights, or, what he talks about being human, and, so you have these civil rights or civic rights, and then political rights, and then socio-economic rights. In the theory and in the perspective of human rights, we talk of three generations of rights, which are also some way, during the 1960s, when T.H. Marshall's book came, as well as, because that was the time of the civil political, the civil rights movement in America, which became very, very, it was the demonstrations, it was felt across the world. So even when you didn't have internet and, the kind of information technology, civil rights movement was became very publicized, across the press, across by the press, the international press. And it became a very important issue in the United Nations. And I will come to, something about Martin Luther later. But it was during that time, during those times of, the post-colonial, states, that is, the colonialism has just partially ended. I would not say that colonialism has fully ended. Maybe, in the 40s and in the 50s, states became politically sovereign. But then, we are continuing with something which is known as neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism, and with, the market economy that we are living in, we know that there is a sector of G5 and then G7 and G20, where, even the countries of the world are actually, they form a kind of an hierarchy. So we cannot say that all states are equal, but there was this kind of a debate, in the 50s and the 60s. And we talk about these three generations of right. The very first is the civil political rights. That is, civil rights are essentially, in Hindi, we use the same term for citizenship and civic, that is Nagrik. But in English, we use civil. So civil rights are different than a little bit of citizenship rights. Why? Because you have, humans per se have civil rights. For example, the right to live, the right to sustain. Now, these are civil rights, the right to have have a friendly neighborhood, the right to join a particular association. These are civil rights, and these are also rights which every individual, even when you, they are not territorial rights. So even when you are outside your country, for example, if you lose your passport, you have a right to approach the police station and, your embassy. So those are also your rights while you are in foreign land. So, those are, what were termed as civil rights. And then came, the political rights. Now, why I've written civil political together is because they are known as the first generation. But let me tell you, there was a huge time gap between the civil rights and the political rights. They did not come together. Because political right means the right to vote, the right to stand for elections. Politically, we are equal before law. So, those rights came much later. And even in the 1960s, which I started with, the civil political movement, the civic rights movement in America, we know that, the Blacks, although it was all written and, America is one of the most modern democracies, we keep on, celebrating and talking about it. And whenever we are talking about federalism, we are talking about presidential government, we are talking about separation of power, we go back to the American Constitution, and you do it in comparative politics, very, very often. That is one of the things which is taught in the curriculum across the world. It's not just in India. But at the same time, it was this, epitome of democracy, which was not given, political, equal civil political rights to its Black population. So on the basis of race, the people were discriminated. And that is why civil political rights, although they form the very first generation of rights, there is a huge gap between the two. And, I'm nowhere saying that, it has already been given to everybody. Because there are always people, who will struggle, who will keep on saying that, and I'm not just saying that they are saying, but it's true that, there will always be communities and groups of people who will, who will not be given these rights so easily. So you have to struggle to get these rights. The second generation of rights, which I termed as welfare rights, were essentially, what many people talk of as socio-economic rights. That the socio-economic rights, contain, for example, the right to employment, the right to education, the right to housing, the right to judiciary and judicial, what are the rights you have when you are, let's say, sent to a prison. So, and they are essentially for human welfare, and that is why I always talk of them as welfare rights. That is education, better life, better employment, better housing, sanitation, health, water, food, unpolluted air. Now these came up as the second generation of rights, again very, very fundamental for fuller human growth. And the last and the final generation, of course, there might be another, very soon an addition, but till now, the third generation of rights are known as group rights. Now, group rights, again, the term, many people use group, many people use collective rights. Now, the distinction is like, for example, when you say, I belong to the group of students. So I am into a student group. They are used pretty synonymously. I'm a students collective. You don't use the term collective. You might say a students union, a students association. So that is by virtue of one individual's identity as a student that you belong to a group, right? And that is why we call it a group right. Or you belong to, let's say, you are belonging to a medical group, or you are belonging to a teachers group, or you are a trader, so you belong, workers, labor, so you have trade unions, you have teachers union, you have doctor unions. Now those are kinds of groups by virtue of an identity which might not be your full-time identity, in the sense that you might be a student for some time, then you might enter a profession, and you then become a part of another group. Now I was a student, so till I was a student, I was a part of, I could call the group of a students group, right? But at the same time, now that I've been teaching for so long, I belong to the teachers union. So that way, group, when we use the term, it's about grouping together, basically on the fundamentalities of an identity, which is not a given identity, but which we get because we are students or due to our profession, right? While as when we talk about community rights or collective rights, then those are rights, again, because one is born, they are given, and they are not rights which we get, that is not a, an identity. And that is why we use the term ascriptive, that is by birth. So for example, I'm a woman, so I belong to a community of women, a gender. So as a gender community in the social, in the social statistics of a society, I belong to a particular gender. So, gender then becomes your collective right, or your, or something which is not in just, used as group rights. But having said that, these two terms in a lot of books you will see are used synonymously, group and collective rights. But fundamentally, I feel that, collective rights are your community cultural rights, religious rights, rights of minorities, because you belong to a particular ethnic group, an indigenous group, you are a member of a First Nation. And it is because of those. So it's not an acquired identity, it is an ascriptive. Acquired means something that we acquire. Like, for example, every child might not be a student. So they might not have students group, but they will belong to what is, a collective right of being children. Okay, so they will belong to a group of children rights. So in that sense, I'm making the distinction, but there are many people who do not make this distinction. And I think I'm making this distinction because, my specialization also goes back onto multiculturalism, and multiculturalists normally make these distinctions, which are then very important, as you apply these rights into different societies. Okay. Now, this is the speech I was talking about, Martin Luther King's. I wanted to show you the video, but because of copyright, I cannot, I could not insert the YouTube, speech of Martin Luther King. But I think, one of the most important thing, which Martin Luther King's speech of 1963, where he talks about, it's very famously known as I Have a Dream speech. And it is not only, just, he's of course talking to the Blacks in the United States of America, but it has a connotation worldwide. It is not just specifically for those people, because, when he talks about, a promise that all men, Black men, white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He is talking to what that time was called as the Negroes, and the term black was not so much used. It was mostly the term Negro that was used. And we know that, the term Negro also has particular connotations, because a Negro means, the word, the genesis of the term comes from somebody between a human and an animal. And that is how, the concept, or, the term, the vocabulary and the term comes up. And he talks about equal dignity, equal happiness, equality of all citizens. And it is quite a paradoxical thing, as I earlier also said, that United States of America they wrote a constitution, a very, very magnificent constitution coming out of the Philadelphia Convention on the Declaration of Independence, and yet the majority of the population was devoid of rights. And here I would just like to make a small clarification. A lot of times we talk about democracy as majority rule, but if you actually see that rights are not only for the majority or the minority, rights are supposed to be for everybody, and for everybody to live an equal life. Equality might be very idealistic, it will be very, very difficult to reach, but just because it is difficult to reach, we should not stop dreaming about equality. And that is why some people are given special rights, because without those special rights or those special guarantees, they might not even be able to attain the basic rights, which are so easy for another group of population to attain. And that is not based on majority and minority, because most of the time the people who rule are a small minority, a small number of elites who rule. In India, it's only 545 people belonging to the parliament. And then, within the parliament, it is the executive, who is ruling. And that's a small, very, very small number given the huge population. So even in democracy, we are ruled by the minority and not by the majority. The conception comes up that, it is majority who, democracy is majority rule. No, it's not like that. I'm sorry, it is not. If a political party gets a majority, can form a government. But that, again, the way, elections are done, the way counting is done, whether it is first past the post system, so there are many variations. So most of the time, remember that the people who rule us, the people who govern us are always a small minority governing. The people who make the policies are always small number of people. Right. So it is not, because I have seen this, a lot of us, mistake that it is the rights of the majorities. No, rights are for everybody, not for the majorities or for the minorities. Now I will come to the kind of rights. Now, these are some of the most fundamentally, different kinds of rights, which are, taught, which have been debated, discussed, deliberated upon. The first distinction is negative and positive rights, moral, legal rights, civil and political rights, socio-economic rights. Now, as I said that, the third generation of rights, cultural rights, I've already explained that. So I'm just going to go through, what are negative and positive rights. Now, essentially, negative rights, from the perspective of human individuals, because rights are conferred, they are guarantees for humans, and they are not given. The state is essentially, or the judiciary more so, is essentially the guarantor and the interpreter of rights. But humans get rights because they are humans. So the state is there to protect rights, not to give rights. And this is very, very important. Remember, that's why I said in the very beginning, we have rights. We are born with rights. And, in a minute, I will go to the natural theory of rights. And I think, we will understand it better there. So negative rights and positive rights, when we talk about rights, negative rights are rights which all of us have, in the sense that, we cannot intervene, the state cannot intervene into our life, as well as another individual cannot intervene into my life. Now, there has been, if I give you an example, let's say right to privacy. So what do, I should have a right not from anybody in my neighbor or my family to infringe upon my privacy, or, to enter my room without seeking permission, or to enter my classroom without seeking permission. Now, those are known as negative rights. Why negative? Because these rights also put some kind of duties on the other, and that is why they are termed as negative rights. So they are different than positive rights. Negative rights always put some kind of obstacle, and I can't say obstacle, but some kind of hindrance, right? So, the other people have a duty like, for example, if I don't want somebody to enter my bedroom without, knocking, or enter my room without knocking, that is a negative right, because it actually abstains that other individual from entering my room very freely, right? While a positive right is a right which will take the discussion further. For example, a positive right is, let's say, individual right to education, individual right to equality, or my own right to drive carefully or to be safe. Now, those are rights which all of us will, talk about, and these are pretty universal in nature, because all of us want to be safe, all of us want to have a good life, and all of us want to have education and good employment. So, then those become positive rights, because, it is not actually stopping somebody from something, but all of us should come together and celebrate that, or, struggle and demonstrate to attain those rights. So that is why they are positive rights. The second is moral and legal rights. Moral rights are morality. Morality might not be legal. Now, for example, there's this very famous statement which we keep on using. It's a pronoun that honesty is the best policy. Now, that is a moral statement, right? So even if you have been dishonest, let's say, I just, somebody said that, why are you late to class today? And I said that, oh, because there was a huge traffic. Now, that might be a lie, okay? So that is a moral principle. I might be just lying to save my bag, that, just for the teacher to say, oh, because there was a lot of traffic, I came late. But that is not legally wrong. Okay, that means, I have not actually performed anything which is illegal. Morally, it might be wrong that I've been dishonest and, I did not speak truly or truth, the truth to my teacher, but that was just to save myself or to save somebody else. But legal rights then are rights when, an individual has committed something wrong, right? Or, at the same time, being wronged at, that, somebody else has done something wrong to me legally. For example, me driving on the road without, stopping at a red light, right, is actually, illegal. Okay, so those are the legal rights, because for others, it is a legal right, because somebody might die of an accident because of my, not abiding by the rules, the legal rule to stop at a red light, right? But then that is, so remember that legal rights are mostly moral rights, but all moral rights are not legal rights. You cannot say that, morally, I am a vegetarian, so you should be also a vegetarian. Now, that has nothing to do with legality. That is just a moral right. It can be a religious right, it can be a spiritual right, but I cannot impose that on somebody else. While legal rights are, they are inalienable at times, because, if you do not perform those rights, somebody else will be harmed in a very wrong manner. Civil political rights, I have already explained. It's all about, civil duties, civic duties, political duties, and political rights. And I'm talking about duties and rights in the same breath, because rights always comes up with duties, because my right is your duty. If I, if both of us do not abide, let's say, by the traffic rules, somebody or the other is going to be harmed, right? So that is why it is my legal right to drive on the road, and your legal right, as well as my legal right, also to stop at red lights. Because if I do not stop, or if we do not stop, somebody else might be harmed. And that is why, they become, it's a collective, the entire society has to perform it. It is not just that, some people have to, perform these rights for others. And that is why when you infringe on anybody's legal rights, there are penalties. Okay, so, and in the fourth is socioeconomic rights. That is essentially, social rights are about social welfare. For example, getting, being a part of poverty alleviation program or Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Now, those are, social rights of individuals as well as communities. By virtue of being Indians, we all should have those kind of welfare rights. Economic rights are, although they are, most of the time, they are inalienable, but, the state has completely, it cannot always give economic rights to everybody, or it cannot protect everybody's economic rights, because we have so much of joblessness, unemployment, people live under poverty people are jobless, they don't have homes, they are homeless. So, those are also important things that, one has to have those socioeconomic rights for the fulfillment of living as a human. Now I come to the theories of rights. And after theories, I will talk about the perspectives and debates. How much time do I have, Shipra? I'm sorry, but I can't see my watch here.
Yeah, you have, ma'am. You can speak for another 20.
All right. Means I have another half an hour or 20 minutes?
Yes, you have.
All right. So, these are, the four most important, theories of rights. The first is the natural theory of rights, the utilitarian theory of right, the social justice or the welfare theory of right, and the libertarian theory of right. Now, why only four? And one can also talk about liberalism and, maybe, utilitarianism, multiculturalism, but those I have actually taken as perspectives, because they, a theory is when, you have an established notion about what rights are from a particular perspective. So the natural theory of rights, which actually goes back to Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, both these thinkers, as well as finally, Rousseau, so the three social contractualists, as we keep on talking about, they were the first ones to give the theory of rights as natural rights. That we have rights, qua rights. Qua rights means essentially, qua is a French term saying that because we are humans. So we have rights by virtue of being humans, and these are natural rights. Now, and human rights actually borrows a lot from the theory of natural rights. Okay, that natural rights are rights given to us by nature, that we all are born on this planet Earth. All the resources are for all of us, but at the same time, the natural theory of rights also had a caveat, and the caveat was that it also, even the divine theory of rights, that is, king and the emperors are the march of God on earth, very famously put up by Hegel, the German philosopher, that that you believe that these humans, that is the kings, represent gods on earth. Now that also has its genesis in natural theory of rights, and that is why the social contractualists actually decipher, and they talk about, like, for example, Thomas Hobbes in his most famous work Leviathan talks of one very fundamental natural right, and that is the right to life. Right, the right to protection, preservation of life, because life is the most fundamental thing for humans. You are human because you are born and you are living, because all of us know that death is the final destination, but it is the journey from life to death. Right, that is your life. Otherwise, you are born and you might die of, let's say, a female feticide. People might be killed because of, there might be a pandemic or any kind of health hazard, malnutrition, hunger, starvation. So these, for Hobbes, and specifically in some of the chapters, I know that a social contract is something you all must have done sometime in life, specifically students of social sciences and particularly political science. So the social contractualists believe, Hobbes believed that life is fundamental, and that is why individual right to life, that is a natural right to live, is the most paradigmatic and the most central core right of all living creatures, be it animals, be it humans, be it plants. You are born to live, not born to die. Right, and that is the difference, because death, as I said, is the final destination. But then we do not think of every day as, we are not, a mother does not give birth to a child to die. Right, she gives birth to a child to live, to flourish, to prosper. Right, to sustain life. And finally, all of us know as humans that death is final. So the right to life, for Hobbes becomes very important, natural right. The second comes, John Locke, for whom, he actually adds another. So he says that it is not only right to life, but right to liberty and property. Because if you say right to life, but you do not have the liberty to live life as you want, or even to live life, you need some basic, resources, right? So if you do not have the liberty to actually attain those resources, then, you cannot live. because for living there are certain needs which must be fulfilled. And that is why, Locke starts talking about the right to liberty, and related to the right to liberty is the right to property. He says that, only people, who have some property, have actually got that kind of a negotiating power to attain liberty. Because liberty, again, is a value which people will not give you and grant you. These are not grants that somebody will give you liberty. Nobody is going to give us liberty until and unless we fight for it. So, and how can we fight for us? One way, one of the weapons of the weak is, solidarity, unity. Numbers matter, but not always, right? And that is why, he says that some property, and here by property, the connotation is not only a material, property of, let's say, wealth and house and land, but also, there is this mention that we all humans have a property in ourselves, because we can actually work and get something that is the materialistic currency or the money, which will then form the basis of exchange in the market to buy us things which might give us some liberty. So there are, of course, controversies on that, but, Locke talks about liberty and property. And the final natural rights, comes up from the Swiss-born, political philosopher Rousseau, who talks and who actually adds, into this list of rights, the right to equality, which then becomes, again, although it's a last addition to the right to equality, the right to equality is the last addition to these, social contractualist theories of natural rights. But for Rousseau, he says all humans are born on the earth as equals, as humans. And now we know that, it is, easier said than done. And, as I said, that, we get privileges by the accidental virtue of birth, which is not very virtuous, which is just accidental. It's like a trump. It's like a trump card. It's like, who is born where is not something that we humans decide, right? So that is then the theories of rights, the natural theory of right. The utilitarian theory of right, which was propounded by Jeremy Bentham, and later on by James Mill, as well as his son, J.S. Mill, John Stuart Mill. And for the core principle of utilitarianism is that the greatest number, the greatest happiness of the greatest number. Now, what that means is that for utilitarians, if certain rights are making the majority of the people happy, so it is essentially those rights which are important. That is, the utility of something is actually measurable. So this is a particular theory. Again, it's been critiqued, a lot by many people, especially, social justice, feminists, multiculturalists. They critique this kind of an utilitarianism, as well as egalitarian, people who believe that, equality is a very important principle. And even if we cannot achieve, final or absolute equality, because that's very difficult to attain, there has to be some kind of equity. So those are the people who actually are against utilitarian principle and theory of rights, because they feel that rights are not utilities. And there's a very famous book by H.L.A. Hart, where he mentions, and it's a very old book written in the early 1950s, rights as utilities. And the entire argument of Hart is that rights are not utilities. They might, you might utilize a right to get something, but then what you get is not always quantified. It actually the world view of rights can be very, very materialistic, as well as something very immaterialistic. For example, respect, dignity, happiness, right? Determination, freedom. Now, these are not always, they are not materialistic in that sense. You cannot measure freedom. You cannot measure happiness. You cannot measure liberty. You cannot measure somebody by saying that dignity, okay, I can measure it. So those are immeasurable. But utilitarians believe that, everything can be quantified. In fact, they also have formulas to, measure happiness. And I think, with the new kind of technology and artificial intelligence, which we are having now, I actually don't see, how, things cannot be, measured, because nowadays everything is about measuring. So, psychologists, psychiatrists, they are there, as well as, human sciences, within human sciences and natural sciences, quantity has become very, very important than the quality. So one talks about quantified rights. The third one is social justice or the welfare theory of rights. Now, this actually, came up. It wasn't as if, the 19th century or the 20th century was devoid of social welfare. In fact, just after the Second World War, and even, within the League of Nations, there was a talk of welfare, welfare of people, welfare of refugees, welfare of, women, children, and communities, who suffer because of the war, or people who do not have property, what will happen to them? So there was this kind of a talk about, and there were also written documents on social welfare. But within political philosophy, social welfare or social justice theory of right was became very famous after the publication of John Rawls's A Theory of Justice in 1971. Now, John Rawls's A Theory of Justice in 1971 is a very remarkable book where John Rawls says that what rights have to be related to social justice. Rights and justice are like two sides of the same coin. These are cliches, these are statements which are used. You cannot talk of justice without rights, and rights are meant for justice. They are very, very important. So it is not that rights are means and justice is the end, or justice is means and rights is the end, but both of them, rights and justice, walk together. So John Rawls talks about it, and he gives these different principles of equality and liberty. And the most important core principle of social justice theory is justice as fairness. That one has to be fair. And how is fairness? And not fairness is not your fair and lovely glory kind of a thing, but fairness is to be fair to every individual. Not to be neutral, but also to try not to be biased, which is very, very difficult. But nonetheless, Rawls says that one has to be fair when imparting justice. And how can that be achieved? Specifically, when we talk about policies of social welfare or education policy, health policies, all these fundamental policies, how can it be? What is the yardstick? How do we measure that it is really a social welfare policy? And for that, Rawls says that the measurement, if one has to measure, because Rawls is against utilitarianism, so he says that you cannot quantify it, but the measurement has to be qualitatively, in the sense that any policy which actually benefits the least advantaged populations of a country or a state or a community are the policies which are the best policies. So when you are writing or when you are formulating, assessing a policy, that should be the paradigmatic yardstick, that that it is benefiting or it is advantageous to the least advantage. That is really like we nowadays talk about the creamy layer among the OBC, and then we are also we have started using in Indian politics terms like extremely backward classes, backward classes, extremely backward, extremely backward, disadvantaged, backward. So in political theory, the very recent political genre of terminologies which we use these, extremely disadvantaged. So in that sense, Rawls was the pioneer who actually talks about the least advantaged. People who do not have any advantage, they are living on the fringes, and they are living on the margins because, and people at the center somewhere are responsible because of people living in the margins, because it is the power dynamics as to who decide where is the center and where is the margin. So that is talking about a social justice theory. The libertarian theories of right, again, a very important person from the libertarian school is Robert Nozick, the colleague of John Rawls. They are from the same university, and Robert Nozick actually comes up with his book State, Anarchy and Utopia in 1974 as a kind of in fact he writes a book to challenge John Rawls's A Theory of Justice, and it was published in 1974. Now, libertarians believe in what is known as entitlement theory. They believe in fair competition, And they believe that, and I will just explain what fair competition and how it talks with rights, and what is it, when they talk about entitlement. So for libertarians like Robert Nozick, who propounded libertarianism, they say that, look, if there is fair competition, for example, all of us start, there is an eligibility criteria for UPSC that you are, minimum criteria is graduation with 50% marks or 40%, just barely passing marks. And then, so that eligibility criteria is the, measurement of fairness, that, it's a fair competition. And then, everybody competes and somebody becomes a UPSC officer, somebody becomes an IAS officer, clears, this entrance exam, while others cannot. But then, once the person who has cleared the exam, will get all the benefits and the privileges, and, that is fair competition. Now, there is nothing wrong in it, because most of the competitive exams are like that. But then comes the issue within libertarianism is that when you start, that is when you actually put or you draw this line, that let's say everybody is going to have a race. So you draw a line for a race. Now somebody, it's just like the hare and the tortoise. Somebody, that, they all started from the same place, but then, physically, mentally, culturally, where you are born, you might be disabled, you might be physically very unwell. So, where you start from and where you end up, that, eligibility criteria, and libertarians, they believe, because it was the same eligibility, we are fair and, we are just, and, that is talking about equal rights. Later on, if people are becoming rich, if a capitalist is very rich, then it is by virtue because, their families have worked very hard, while somebody is poor because, you did not work very hard. So they talk of, richness, wealthiness, property, not by virtue of birth, but because somebody has worked hard. They forget that at times, where you are born, that does have a huge impact. And that is why, people have critiqued libertarian, school of thought, saying that they are completely unaware about the social realities. Societies are so stratified, they are so hierarchized. There are always, stereotypes and biases in every society. Wherever you live, you might be belonging to a very developed, developing, or whatever, underdeveloped country. Every society, and I'm not talking about countries, every society is biased. So libertarians actually do not take that into consideration. So, for example, anybody who does not believe, let's say, in a reservation policy or affirmative action, libertarians completely support that. They do not believe in any kind of reservation or affirmative positive discrimination. So these are then, the four most important theories of rights. I will be talking about human rights, but human rights then is not a theory of human rights, although there are many books written. But human rights will have, rights from variety of the kinds of rights which I discussed earlier. And that is why you cannot have one theory of human rights, because human rights are, it's actually, you can keep on adding, depending on the context, depending on, the human evolution. Here now, I've actually added to human rights controversies. Now, when we talk about human rights, and I have written here, they are endowed by reason of their humanity, and that is why they are inalienable and fundamental. But at the same time, states are not bound by, of course, there are, they signed the United Nations Declaration and other conventions. But at the same time, because we still believe in political sovereignty of the state, it, sometimes, like, for example, the apartheid, the apartheid in South Africa, so, there was, legal sanctions, international sanctions were imposed by the General Assembly, the United Nations General Assembly, on South African government because they were following a racial policy of apartheid. While, in the present times, if you see, when there was this urge in General Assembly, 2 years back, to issue sanctions against the state of Israel, USA vetoed, right? And why? Because, the state of Israel has actually completely eaten up, the Palestinian territory. And not only that, they have, there is a mass murder, mass elimination of Palestinian children, women, and, so much of atrocities, inhuman atrocities have been committed on them. but we could not have a sanction. So of course, the power dynamic works, and that is why even human rights is not devoid of controversies. I have actually taken these two this entire these two thing are I mean, you can't see it here, but I've added as the sources is from Andrew Clapman's book on human rights and introduction. Here is a newspaper article which is talking about why people are completely the UK population here, specifically the Sun is a United Kingdom daily, and they are completely there was a voting in about human rights, and most of the people voted against human rights because they said that for example there can be many issues like many people believe that the rapist must be killed in the sense of course prosecuted, and there should be death sentence, and there that again is not a human right justification, because human rights, even the women feminist human right activists do not believe in the death sentence for rape. They believe that it is the duty of the government, the state, as well as the society at large to to tune itself and to train itself in such a way that women feel protected and there are no rapes, because just killing or murdering, or in fact finally giving a death sentence to a rapist is not going to solve the problem of rape. But then there can be different variations, different views, and that is why this particular voting when done, they believe that in the interest of the killers, rapists, and pedophilists, the victims, they actually felt that there should be no human rights and these people should be simply given death punishment. And that, so there are people who do not, and who might vote against human rights act. So everybody is not a believer of human rights. It's not an easy position. While in the second newspaper clipping from the Sunday Telegraph, you see the Afghans hijacked a civilian airliner are rewarded with the judgment that they are entitled to stay in Britain as at the taxpayers' expense. Now, again, this is a kind of a belief, because a lot of people, and this has been, in the past 15, 20 years, specifically, post 9/11, we have heard about Islamophobia, terrorism, international terrorism, as well as immigration. People are so scared of immigrants because the entire debate in the mass media is that immigrants come to your country and they take away the resources, they take your jobs, and they will spoil and pollute your culture and religion. So all kinds of dynamics are happening. But if we go back to the beginning of immigration, you cannot actually put a finger and say this is when it started. You can say in 20th century it was here, but immigration, human globalization, which we always thought was a term, and in the 20th century we said 1990s and globalization is as old as human population, as old as human civilization. People have moved from one place to another, because this imaginary of international borders is very recent. People would move from country to country or from state to state, empire to empire, giving a kind of a tariff. So you have to pay your something like nowadays you have a visa, but it wasn't something that people were stopped from moving from one place to another. And that is why we can never say that this is a land which belongs to me and to my ancestors. How long? Maybe in the past 200, 400 years. Before that, you do a DNA testing and the human genome test has come up. You can actually say that, oh my God, I have been talking myself as an Indian, or maybe belonging to the Aryan race or the Dravidian race, and suddenly when your result comes, you say, oh my God, there is 20% Germanic, 5% Afro-Asian, 2% Caucasian blood. You'd never know, because we humans have been traveling and our ancestors have been traveling. So in that sense, the second one talks about Afghans, and immigration was also, it can be also because of economics, because there are countries where you do not have population to work. For example, in Germany, the youth population is very less, and the young people who are getting married, do not want to have kids. So the population is going into negative. So they want people to work in their countries, right? So they are, so by opening up immigration, they are not actually doing a favor on anybody. Their own economies will not run. But at the same time, when people start coming up, it's not easy for the people also to leave their houses. They come for economic reasons, for jobs, for better life. But again, then they don't get equal rights as the citizens. So, there is always a mismatch. And, in this second thing, again, when you talk about Afghanistan, again, this was, of course, this is a book which was published in 2012. Even then, Afghanistan was, not at war, but there were issues. And now, very recently, we have seen, how the Afghan state, once the US Army left, and how the Taliban has come. So, for the Afghan population, for the women, children, men of Afghanistan, human rights and the plight of human rights, or the kind of the say, when they demonstrate and they ask the international community, that is a call for help on the basis, on grounds of human rights. So there can be population and people who do not believe in human rights, and there can be population and people who believe in human rights. And again, at the same time, just because one is a believer of human rights doesn't mean that you believe in human rights for everything. We always believe in human rights when our rights are evaded and taken by or violated. When it is a matter of somebody else's right, then we might be much more selfish and self-centered. Now, I'm coming to the last bit, and these are some debates on rights. And the first school, is the communitarian school. I have taken this particular snippet is from my own, from my own chapter on rights, which, as Shipra mentioned. So the communitarians believe that individual is not an abstract category. What do you mean by abstract category? Communitarianism is essentially an approach and a thinking and the idea of community and communitarian thought is exactly, again, I would say exactly parallel to the liberal school, because the liberal school and liberal democracy believes in individuals, that individuals are very important, and individuals have the freedom of choice. So when you talk about rights, you actually talk about individual rights and not so much about community or group rights. While communitarians believe that individual is not an abstract category. Individuals are embedded. They are embedded in a culture. They are embedded in a religion. They are embedded in a gender. And that is why it is very important that we actually identify and recognize this embeddedness of individuals. They are not atoms, moving here and there, that you just give them individual rights. But what they understand by individual right is also colored by their belonging into a particular community. And the most important work here comes from Michael Sandels and also Michael Walzer's work. Here it is Liberalism and the Limits of Justice by Michael Sandel, but at the same time, Walzer's work on limits, theory on the limits of justice is also a very, very important work by the communitarians. They believe that, because liberalism only talks about or focuses on rights and not so much on justice. Again, this, particular criticism has been actually, again, completely, like there are, people from liberal school who have actually voiced against this. So they believe, but, communitarians believe that, the liberals believe only on individualism. They forget that individuals are rational human beings, but they are also born in a family, they are born in a community. And that is why only when you talk about personal freedom, personal equality, or personal rights and individual rights, what you are doing is you are neglecting the possibility of community rights, of understanding and recognizing that individuals belong to community. And that is why, humans are dependent on the society, and societal norms also dictate what humans believe as their rights, or what is the normal notion, what is being successful, what is being happy. All these are actually societal values, and that is why we cannot when we talk about rights, we cannot actually completely ignored the community. And that is why they talk about the politics of common good. In fact, this community, this notion of commonness, common good, which nowadays in political philosophy we are talking from the perspective of environmental justice, from the perspective of that the earth belongs to everybody, the resources of the earth belongs to everybody. And the way monopoly capitalism has come up, and that everybody is eaten up, so water has been privatized, food is getting privatized, land is anyway privatized, how that affects human population. That notion of common good is something very central to the communitarians. And the environmentalists and environmental right activists have actually taken this notion of commonness or community participation, community recognition, community development. These are terms which comes from the communitarian school of thought on rights. The multicultural perspective, is something which came up in the 1990s. Multiculturalism as a notion, as an approach to political life, political philosophy, and most importantly, rights. They believe that cultural rights are intrinsic. In fact, it was some way a kind of an answer to the communitarian critique, because if you see the trajectory of these liberal perspective, and then the communitarian and the multicultural perspective, multiculturalism really comes up in a big way in the post when the erstwhile Soviet Union, just after the disintegration of USSR in 1990. So multiculturalism actually comes up as a big notion, as a big theory, as a big approach in 91 onwards. So in the 1990s, you will see lots of work on multicultural perspectives, which continues till about 2005, into the 21st century. Now they believe, as answering to the communitarian school, who believe that liberalism does not believe in cultural rights and community, and they believe that humans are completely atoms, moving here and there. So multiculturalists, to answer that criticism against criticism of communitarians against liberals, comes up with this value that the most important rights are cultural rights, because humans belong to culture. Now here they do not always define culture, because defining culture becomes very difficult. And here again a kind of a specification, because a lot of people, my students used to ask me, is culture religion? Religion has cultural connotations, but culture is not only religion. So culture is a bigger umbrella within which you have religion, you have customs, you have rituals, which can be religious, which can be spiritual, which can be community, which can also be societal. And here, for example, when you celebrate a puja, you are going to have the Durga Puja, or you celebrate Eid, or you celebrate Christmas. There are certain rituals. Like, for example, people, when they celebrate the Shera, after the Navratras, you fast. Now, fasting has religious connotation as well as a cultural connotation. It's not always that you are fasting only for God. People might be, decorating their house. Now, nowhere in any of the religious books it was written that decorate your house, right? But those are cultural things, which has come up. Or you decorate, you make a alpona, you make a rangoli. Now, those are not written in a religious text that you celebrate. Those are, societal rituals, which, a community endorses, right? So you can have, lightning in Diwali as well as in Eid, as well as in Christmas. It is not a religious kind of a sanctity that, I'm a Hindu, so I will only light a candle. Or I am a Christian and only I will light a candle. So that is why, culture in that sense is a far bigger umbrella within which you have religion. Religion is one perspective of culture, not all. While your food habits, what you wear, how you dress up, how you talk, what kind of families you have, the values, for example, we value that, we should respect our elders. Now that might be a very Indian kind of a value, that might not be a value in certain cultures. So then for multiculturalists, these are one's cultural rights. You are born into a culture, and those rights are intrinsic of being humans. And then the second point is that there is always, and that multiculturalists also talk about, there is always friction between individual and cultural rights. quite often. Because when you talk of, let's say cultural rights, then most of the cultural rights, and I will just come to the second slide on feminism, are very patriarchal. Now, culture, woman's body becomes a kind of, it's like a collage of culture. So women are supposed to wear Mangal Sutra, women are supposed to wear burqa, women are supposed to wear sindoor, so it is, and, with the women, we attach honor of the culture, attach honor of a particular family or religion. So, in that sense, it is not always with the men. And that is a mismatch. So cultural rights of the community or of a culture then are not equal between men and women or between different genders, not just men, women, LGBTQI, third gender. There can be many different, sexual orientations. So, there is always this kind of a friction then that what do you protect? What happens to the individuals within the communities? And, if there is a controversy, if there is there is a friction, there is a fight, there is a contradiction, then whom should you side with? And in that perspective, human rights have really made a big contribution to these kind of controversies. Whenever you have a controversy between a cultural right and an individual right, a lot of times, the judges actually or the legal experts actually go back to human rights, thinking about what is human and what is then the priority of that particular context of being human. And again, the third point here, again, when we talk about rights, multiculturalism talks of political equality. And this is something, political equality is a very central notion to rights, that, everybody is politically equal. We all have right to vote. But we forget that, half of the world is not even democratic. So how can we have political equality? And even in the countries where, we talk about democracies, political equality is just written in the constitutions. There are variations, cultural, racial variations based on caste, religion, language, ethnicity, indigenous communities, whether you belong to a very higher caste or upper caste or a lower caste. So all those, so on one principle, you believe on equality, while as that is given in the constitution, while as the society is very, very unequal. And here, the multiculturalists actually make distinction between formal and substantive equality. They say formal equality is what is given in the constitution, that you say that everybody is equal, equality before law, or equal protection of law, all due process will be followed in case a person is imprisoned or convicted or in trial. So those are kinds of formal equality. But substantive equality is when you recognize not just those laws, but also that individual and the background of that individual. That you cannot, for example, if there is a law that any theft, a person who has stolen something should go for 1 month imprisonment. Now that is a law, because laws are always given very sketchily, like laws are essentially in skeleton form, and the flesh comes from the judiciary when they are debating it. So if there is a law which says that the punishment for stealing is 1 month imprisonment. Now think about it. Now two contexts. One, a child might have stolen a bread because the child was very hungry, and another person has stolen money from the bank and has run away. Now these both are stealing. One is stealing of a bun or a bread or some food. The other is stealing of money. But you cannot equate both the stealings and you can say, okay, 1 month imprisonment to both, right? Then you have to understand the notion of substantive equality. That is the background of these two people who have been stealing. One is a child and one is an adult, firstly. So that is a distinction. Let's say even if both were adults, one is due to hunger, which is a natural principle that you are hungry. And one is hunger for unprecedented amount of wealth, that you actually ate up, so many people's wealth and ran off. So can you actually equate, both the punishments on the basis of one legal principle saying stealing has to be the penalty or the punishment for stealing is 1 month? That, then becomes the debate. So in the judiciaries, then they debate not only from the perspective of what wrong the person has done, but why has the person done it? as well as the background of the person. And those are very important notions to understand multicultural perspectives of right, because they believe in the background. Now, it is not as if only multiculturalists were the first ones to come up with it. Liberals also believe, but in most of the time, because liberals believed only on individuals, and individual becomes the core principle of rights, they sometimes, completely neglect and ignore the cultural aspects. And so the last point which I've written is group rights are important, but what happens when they discriminate among members, like intra-group members? Inter-group rights are mostly given. Like we do have countries giving minority rights on the basis of religion, on the basis of gender, on the basis of ethnicity, language. There are to make the different groups which are unequal, some kind of parity, very, even a simple kind of a parity principle, intergroup rights are given. But what about within the group? What about a woman who is being beaten up, a very lower caste women? So, vis-a-vis caste, we have given, the group, lower caste people, the list of SCs and STs, they have certain kinds of rights and reservations. But what happens if, say, within that community, there is a lot of domestic violence? Then how are we going to look at it? Are we going to look at it from the lens of gender rights and domestic, that domestic violence is a discrimination against an individual woman? Or should we look at it, from the perspective of that, it is a lower caste, so, the man is belonging to a lower caste and the female is belonging, so it's a family right, so we should not intervene. Now, those are kinds of, very, very paradoxical things that keep on coming, when we talk about intra-group equalities, intra-group rights. And the final thing, I've come to is the feminist perspective, because that actually takes us to the feminist perspective, because feminist perspective, in fact, feminism criticizes liberalism as well as multiculturalism and communitarianism on the grounds that, whenever you talk of community, whenever you talk of individual, as well as even when you talk about culture, community, and society is very biased against women. Because all the rights, what is an individual, who is an individual, what individual rights are all essentially constructed by men. Men construct, men make, and men actually propagate these rights. And then, even most of the constitutions were drafted by male members and not by women. And that is why, women and the marginalized sections of the society were not a party when these rights and, definitions and when these constitutions were made. And that is why, I've taken this, a snippet from Iris Marion Young's 1989 book, a theory of justice, again, and where she talks about differential, justice, in the form of differential citizenship, because she says that one, of course, needs to understand equality. The feminists are not against equality, but then they also believe that, equality, the way, the multiculturalists are understanding, or the communitarians are understanding, or the liberal understanding is at times very different than what, from gender perspective you will understand. For example, there is one, and that is why, feminism is divided into different waves of feminism. And we say that, the very first wave of feminist writers wanted equality. They wanted equal rights vis-a-vis men. That, if men has right, like, the suffrage movement, or the voting rights or property rights, we want exactly the equal rights as men. Then, in the 1970s, post 1975, there was this entire movement based on difference and not on sameness or, similarity. This was a movement based, where feminists, and it is known as the second wave of feminism, who believe that women are physically, mentally, emotionally, and psychologically different. And because the society is there and the society looks at women different, so women not only require rights on the basis of equality, but also their difference. What was the difference? The most important ones were like the child care rights, maternity leaves. Okay, when you assume that, like, for example, if a man is on leave, the man doesn't have to come home and start cooking and washing and taking care of children. So a leave for a man means a weekend for a man will be when his wife or his mother is cooking, or somebody is cooking at home, and, he might be drinking or enjoying and, watching television. I'm just giving a very general perspective. It might be completely the other way around, because women can be very, very powerful and it might be the men working. So that can also happen. But most of the time we see that, the way the societies are built on, women are supposed to be mothers. They are the caregivers. And, whenever, she undergoes maternity and, after, pregnancy and childbirth, there is this expectation that women is supposed to leave her job. She is supposed to be taking care of the child as well as the home. She is the homemaker. You don't call men homemaker, right? You call women homemaker. So, in that sense, the feminist perspective in the second wave specifically, they started highlighting difference, that women are viewed differently and they are also different at times because of their body. And that is why, when they become a mother, a caregiver, then, that those extra facilities or those are women's rights. So, having a maternity leave is a right for a woman. Having a child care leave is a right for a woman. Because women are going to take care, it is expected from a woman to take care of the children much more than the men. In that sense, the second wave of feminism came up, and the final and the third, yet till now, the third wave of feminism, it not only talks about equality and difference, but it talks of post-difference contextuality, in the sense that what happens, for example, if an Islamic woman wants to wear the parda, means, for a white feminist, liberal feminist, it might be an imposition. But, for an Islamic woman, it might be something cultural. And it might be something, not imposed so much, she might feel that I want to wear, a parda, or I want to wear a hijab. That is a part of my culture. What if, an Indian woman wants to wear a sari and, not a Western attire? Now, should we then view that, wearing of a particular cultural sari as, an imposition? Because that used to be a position of, Western liberal feminism, that, it is the men who have imposed, which might be true. But at the same time, we are, socialization takes place, even our professions, you don't expect a faculty member in the college to wear a mini skirts, right? While, if you go to, US, you will, most of the faculty members do not wear a mini skirts, but they wear a skirt till the knee length. So, your profession matters. And, at times, then there are variations, it might be the individual choice and the societal choice. And, the feminist, talking from Western feminism might be differently thinking. So there are, even within these perspectives, a lot of debate and a lot of, criticism that goes on. All right, I think now I have said, so I'll just stop. And if there are any questions, I would love to take them. Thank you so much.
So yes, I opened this, I asked the participants that if there are any questions, if they would like to ask something, they can either use the chat box, or they can also raise their hand and I'll unmute them and they can ask their question directly. Meanwhile, if I think Tripti wants to ask.
No, I have no questions now.
Okay, great. Okay, so meanwhile, there's one question which is related to that, we are seeing a lot of, there was a whole discussion about right to life, which is happening, but there is also an emergence of the voices about right to die, right to, we normally call it euthanasia. So how do we then look at, because life has been seen as something which is a natural right. So then how do we see in this context, the whole, idea or the debate of right to death or die? So this is one question which came from a different source of a participant. And if there are others, I think we can take after this. We have other questions.
Yeah, thank you, Shipra, and thank you to whosoever, who has put up this question. In fact, in my chapter, I do discuss euthanasia also, partially. I would say that, when we talk about right to life and when we talk about euthanasia, although, both the debate about whether you have a right to life, and that is why do you have a right to die or the right to death. And here, again, there are these adverbs which one uses, right to good life. Now, good is a value added, as well as right to a dignified death, right? Because, all cultures believe in certain, customs of death, right? So, you give a dignified goodbye, a kind of a farewell to the departed soul. And I would say that it is very contextual, because euthanasia only comes up not in the context of just right to life. It comes in the context of terminal illness, right? So there are, the entire debate actually came up from people, who have terminal illness, and their families are spending a lot of money, but then there is no hope that they will ever survive, right? And then they plead, or they put petitions in the judiciary, or in front of in the state, that which do not declare the right to euthanasia, that look, we will not be able, we are not going to survive, but we might have another 5 months, 10 months, 2 years, 7 years, but our body is degenerating. We cannot walk. We always need the care of somebody, and that is actually affecting my dignity as an individual. So when we talk of euthanasia, it has certain specific grounds. It's not just vis-a-vis the right to life. Okay. And when we talk of right to life as well as euthanasia, then I don't think it is also just that because a person has cancer, everybody will want to die. No, it's not like that. People most of the times people want to live, and they want to live as much as they can, so with different kind of medication and all. But there are times, there are kinds of diseases where people talk of euthanasia. But at the same time, I would actually put it up in a question like, for example, if a mother comes to know, or if a couple comes to know that the child being born is going to have Down syndrome. Now, in that case, are you going to abort the fetus, or are you going to give, then what is going to be, the final thing, that, whether it will be the right to life, even if the child has Down syndrome, or it will be like, let's just, kill the fetus or abort the fetus right now, because the child will not have the dignified right, or the kind of mobility and the choices which everybody else has. Now those are very, very different situations, and of course depends on state to state. There are many states which make abortion illegal, and there are many times, for example, if you see the medical termination of pregnancy, the MTP Act of India, then that believes that if the fetus is just 8 weeks, or then you can abort, or less than 3 months, or also depends the context. If the child being born is out of let's say out of rape, whether you want, there might be a 13-year-old who was raped and now pregnant. Now, do you want the child to be born? And we keep on hearing of these cases, where the court says that, it is the right of the unborn child, which is more important. And there are many people then who debate that even the mother is a child herself. And isn't her health more, important? So, these are, the difficult situations which come up. But at the whole, I would say that, the notion of euthanasia is specific to certain kind of terminal illness. And we also talk of euthanasia in, because there are also debates about the animal rights, that if a horse is unwell, we lay down the horse, we lay down our animals, because we feel that, they will not be able to perform. What happens in the case of humans, right?
So we have 2 more questions. So one is by Dr. Vinita Diwan, and she's asking how far personal likings of an individual can be termed as human rights. And another one is by Baliram. So he is saying that you had mentioned that rights are claims, rather saying it's an entitlement. So his question is, if there is a claim upon something, then question of duty also arises, that what constitutes these 2 contradictory concepts? Does rights as a claim naturally acquire duty as well?
Yeah. Thank you, Baliram, and thank you, Dr. Vinita Diwan, for those questions. I would say that, how far, your question is how far personal liking of an individual can be termed as human rights. I really don't, see this, can you just explain it a little bit? Like, personal likings, like, what is personal likings? You can say that political likings can be termed as human rights or not. This can be a question. For example, let's say personal liking, I like to eat whatever I want to eat. Now, is that my human right or not? maybe, a lot of people might believe in vegetarianism and others might believe in non-vegetarianism. And then there might be people who believe in veganism, right? Or there are also spiritual people, who will not eat, they will just fast. There are so many gurus and, sadhus who believe in that. So that is a personal choice and that is not a human right. So I cannot say that, vegetarianism is a human right, or, it is, or eating non-vegetarian food is anti-human right. If that is about, personal choices, you are talking about personal likings. Personal likings can, in that sense, I might just say that I don't like a particular person. We all have our personal likings, but then, likings and rights are not similar. I might not like so many things and I might like so many things. I might like to, have a loud party, right? I might be a loud person. I might there are people who, even I have seen in, long time back in the universities and colleges, as well as in hospitals, sometimes doctors speak very badly with the patients. Teachers speak very badly with the students, just by virtue of the power position that, I'm a teacher. I can't say anything and everything to a student or even to another colleague. So those, I might have my personal likings that I don't like a person, but I cannot go and slap that person. Right. So in that sense, your likings and rights are very different. And the second question, I hope, Vinita, I've understood this question well, because if not, then you can always explain that, what you meant by personal likings. To Baliram, yes, Baliram, I did say, and I also remember saying that, I do not like the term entitlements, because, entitlement is a term which is normally used by libertarians, but yes, rights are claims. Rights do, if you use one term, then, they are, you can call off about rights. They are immunities, they are protections, they are entitlements, they are claims, they are dues. So all these terms are used for rights. But at the same time, your question is that, if the question of duty also arises, and I kept on talking about duties, because rights and duties, as even that time I said that rights and justice and rights and duties, they are one cannot perform with the other. Right? You have to, there has to be, rights are there, and rights can only be enjoyed because somebody else is performing a duty. Right? So, there's also this saying that my rights end where the other person's rights begin. So even if I talk of space, I might be moving my hand here and there. But if there's a person standing, I can't be moving my hand and, slapping the person just by saying that this is my right to a space, right? So that space ends where the other person's space, begins. Okay, there is another question does rights as claim naturally acquire duty also? If you go from the very theoretical perspective, Baliram, no. Because, the kings and the emperors always believed in rights, that, they have divine rights. They believe that, I won't say completely no, because they had some notion of duty that, it's not about performance, but that they have to protect, the people of their empire. Right? So they have to protect the population. Now, that is one of the important, duties of the king or the empire or the, whosoever is the ruler. So in that sense, when we talk about natural, claims as, or rights as claim naturally acquired, duty also comes through it. And in fact, when we go back, and I was talking about Thomas Hobbes there, when Hobbes talk about, on man, that is the first chapter, on man. And, he talks about human rights, he talks about legal sovereign rights. He says, and, we all believe that, that Hobbes is a person who is, talking about the Leviathan, where the state is all powerful. But even the ruler, or, through the social contract, the most important person who is the governor or the forming of the, or the legal sovereign, as, he uses the term legal sovereign. The sovereign has one duty. And that duty is the right to protect life of all the individuals. And, even if you go back to Aristotle, even there, Aristotle gives the right to revolution. That is, if, the king does not or is not able to protect the life of individual citizens, of the individuals belonging, the population of the state, then the people of the state have the right to revolt against, the ruler. So in that sense, yes, rights and duties, should and must always come, together. There's another question, right? Is there any specific theories for rights of children? No, Charles, I'm sorry. There is actually, different children rights as a concept came up first in 1959, okay, when the Declaration of Children Rights came up. As again, but it was something which was, subsumed under, the United Nations Declaration of Rights. And I was very sad because one of my PhD students is actually working on children rights. And it is only in 1989, means it took nearly 30 years, after the UN, UNDHR, that, you have a separate convention on child rights, at the United Nations level that comes up. But having said that, children rights actually form, you don't have a theory of child rights. Okay, because child rights theory will also go back to human rights, of also go back to welfare of the child, development of the child, childhood, a kind of a free childhood, a stress-free childhood, a child rights of playing, of education, of good health, right, of being of being devoid of any kind of sexual physical violence. Now these are the parameters and the most core principles on which child rights is built on, and because the principles are more or less similar as the human rights, that is why I won't say there is a separate theory more. And even if people are specifically educationists have been working on child rights, political scientists, there's a dearth of work on child rights, legal scholars work on child rights, POSCO and other things, psychiatrists and child psychology scholars work on child rights, but from political science very few work. Also, I have seen that the states are very skeptical when they talk of child rights. Some states are, over the boundary, like Norway and the Scandinavian countries, where even if you scold your child, you might be imprisoned or the child might be taken away from you. And then we have states, some of the Asian, African, American states, Latin American, South American states, where even if you beat the child, even if the child is sexually exploited by relatives and parents, the child does not have right. So I think, awareness is more important, when we talk of child rights, and, a specific theory of child rights, I really am not aware of. Even people who are writing on child rights take, the basic theories, they come from these different schools. Yeah, I hope I've answered that. Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Thanks for the questions. Anything else? Any other question?
I think these were the set of questions which we had. And yes, Vinita, Dr. Devana, I think you can also see, just for the audience on YouTube, she's saying, ma'am, in terms of feminine spaces, what they like to do, they cannot, like in Afghanistan, they say women do not have right to co-education. But what if they like it? So if you would like to comment on it.
Yeah. Thank you, Vinita. Thank you for, of course, in this online mode, I keep on telling my students, because none of the videos are on, so we can't see. It feels like, your names, and, I can't attach the, the pictures to the names in that sense. But nonetheless, thank you for the question. Yes, Vinita, when you talked about, in terms of Afghanistan, whether you want to go to a co-educational, school, or, even why only Afghanistan? Means, Afghanistan, of course, we are talking right now, from the perspective of Taliban, and again, post 1996 Taliban. I would say that even in India, in fact, in my own family, I remember when I was a kid, both me and my school were put, my brother and myself, my father admitted both of us into what is known as a public school, which is actually a very, very contradictory term. These are all private English medium schools, right? So we both were put into a co-educational school. And I remember my Tauji coming home, and he also had a daughter and a son, and the son used to go to the same school as the two of us, and the daughter was going in, a Bengali medium school, which was only for girls. So I remember him coming and telling my dad that, why have you put your daughter, and, you're spending so much money into a co-educational English medium school, means, why is it that you can't put her into the vernacular medium or, the Bengali medium? She will learn the language, and, she will be with the girls and all. And I still remember my dad's answer, Means, my dad just said that, all the societies, we always have this feeling that, you go to a co-educational school, women they will get spoiled by, sitting next to boys. And what only parents and societies, I've also seen, in the same school, of course, my dad was very, very angry with my Tauji, and they never had a conversation after that for about several years till, my father died. But at the same time, I was so zapped and so surprised, and it was actually a shock that the principal of my school, which was a co-educational school where I was till class 10th, Greenfield Sabdajang Enclave. I remember, from class 6th onwards, we were told to sit boys separately and girls separately. And I would always question this, and my mother used to say that because you are such a rebellious child, you go and fight with everybody, and you went to the principal and told her, ki, why have you done this? Why is it a co-educational? What do you mean by it? I couldn't actually understand, and the principal said that because a lot of parents have complained that boys and girls should sit, separately. Now, here I would say it's how the society thinks. When you talk about menstruation now, there are, people are at least, talking about it. In the 1990s, when I was a, teenage person, it used to be the school used to take all the girls into a separate room, and they used to show us a movie and, talk about periods. And the boys were never even told about periods. And we were categorically told कि लड़कों को जाके बोलना कि लड़कियों के लिए movie दिखाई गई थी. अरे, what the hell? Means I am expected to, have a sexual education and sex education to understand about HIV/AIDS, to understand about sexually transmitted diseases, but the entire onus is put on the girl and not on the boy. And I think similarly then, about contraception, about abortion, parenthood, childhood, motherhood, everything again comes back to the women. So in that sense, I think it's about a problem of the society, and not just Afghanistan. Again, when the way you dress up, means I remember that when I went to the first job, I was told कि आप कुर्ता और पजामा में आ जाती हैं और इसीलिए आप टीचर नहीं लगती. So आप जूड़ा वूड़ा बना के साड़ी पहन के आइएगा. And I so desperately needed the job, Vinita, that I used to wear a sari and a juda just to separate myself out from my students, because my students were barely 2 years junior to me. And thankfully, then I joined Kirodimal, where I could wear whatever, because I always felt that even if you are wearing a trouser or you are wearing a sari, your broad-mindedness does not reflect in the attire that you wear. You can be a very conservative person wearing a jeans and a very Western modern, and again, Western modern are two different concepts, not to be confused together. And you can be very, very modern wearing a sari. It is an individual choice that you feel what you are comfortable in. But at the same time, yes, society does believe. And so I would say that, one should have a choice, but it's not easier. When you make a choice, you have to fight. Like when I made a choice that I want to live the life I want to live, then I had to fight. And it wasn't an easy fight. So I would say, Vinita, that, everybody, the positions which we are taking for ourselves, for our children, we have to keep on fighting. It is never that, your own family members might actually turn against you, but you have to, say that, okay, you might not like me. That's okay. We have difference of opinion, but I believe in this. So that becomes more important.
That is so cool. So, yes, I think she's so happy with the explanation, and I will take this opportunity that truly, not even just this question, your lecture was very insightful for someone who has been reading about rights, reading around, very political values are something which are very close to my heart. And it has been one revision and one revival of many concepts and polishing of so many concepts for me as well. So I'm quite sure that our participants have been, have benefited from this discussion today. And the questions which the participants asked were actually gave us a more to think. So on this note, Dr. Sengupta, on behalf of Ramanujan College Center for Human Rights and Environmental Studies, I thank you so much for giving time on a Sunday on such a short notice. and doing the very first lecture, very first, online lectures. We have been doing this course from the last 6-7 years, but this is the first time that we have gone online, and we have participants from different parts of India. So it is actually an honor to have you with us today, and we really, really hope that we have this continued association with you, not only in the center but with Ramanujan as a whole. So thank you so much for today, and
thank you so much, Shipra, and Ramanujan College, Human Rights. I think you are doing a wonderful job. And I would like to say a big thanks to all the participants who are here and who might not be here, who might be listening to me later on. I always believe that, one is a learner throughout life. So, just because I'm giving a lecture does not always makes me a teacher, because I'm not preaching something. I think, the duty, of a teacher is, or a person, who's a faculty member, whatever it is, of a person is essentially, to tell the students and the learners how to make, better choices, and not to make choices for them. Making choices is a very individualistic thing, and we all learn, so, let's be very open to this conversation and learning. So thank you so much. And if there are any questions, I will be happy to answer later on.
Thank you so much, ma'am. If there's anything we'll share with you, we'll definitely share with you.